Okay, so good evening, good afternoon, good morning, product birds, wherever you are logging in from. Today we have a really special speaker with us. His name is Alex Duong, or also known as Q. Q basically is a product manager at Google, before which he has worked at a plenty of different things. He has worked in Africa for non-profits. He has worked for a lot of internet-based applications, and he's currently a product manager at Google Optimize. And Q, like many other product managers, is not from a technical background. He has navigated his way through a couple of different roles and also has a master's in HCI. So Q today is going to talk about what do product managers need from tech, design, and business. So basically, when you think about product management or products, there are usually three spheres, which are tech, design, and business, that you think about. And often or not, sometimes we think tech is more important. Sometimes we think design is more important, business is more important. But there's a very thin line on how product managers combine these and how to evaluate which one to look into when. And I personally am excited to learn from this. And also, a side note is that Q also actively interviews a lot of Google APMs, so he does have quite a knowledge on this. So with further ado, I'd like to introduce Q. Stage is all yours. Go ahead.
All right, thank you so much. So very nice and very honored to be here, Product Bugs community. Darsh and I circumstantially met each other, and I'm actually super excited to kind of give this talk. My hope is that you'll find this talk to be not your average talk. My goal for this was to ask myself, what could I uniquely bring to the table, and what could really survive for, say, 18 months that no one else would really repeat. So I thought from that lens was how I was approaching today's talk, and I hope you'll find today's stuff exciting. So first thing is there is a Slido in the chat, so make sure you have access to that. And then secondly is, can I get a few thumbs up if you can like hear me okay and my volume is great? Okay, awesome, thank you. All right, so a few house rules, and then we're gonna get into it. So first is, as a product manager at Google, I don't use Slack on an everyday basis. So I actually am like using two monitors. So if I don't always stare at you, it's because I'm probably trying to look at you or the chat or something else. But I am listening and I am trying to be attentive. Second, if there's just a broad question that you have, please use the Slido and pop it in there. If it's a question specific to the content that I'm showing for that slide, then go ahead and just put it in chat, and Darsh or somebody else or myself will kind of monitor, and we can try to answer the question there if it's right pertinent to the slide. Okay, what else do I have for you guys? I think that's it. Okay, so let's go and present some content for you guys. Okay, so can I get a thumbs up if you can see the presentation?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, and then let me just fit some other things here. Okay, great. There we go. Okay, so now I have my presentation and I can see like 20 of you. So this is awesome. Okay, so yeah, as Darsh was saying, it's the last one of the year. Let's have some fun. It would help me a lot to sort of just see the audience. So if you don't mind turning on your webcams, I'd really appreciate that. But if not, no problem. Okay, so let's jump into it. Okay, so the first thing they always tell you, right, in consulting and PM is, well, tell the people where you're going to take them, right? So here's my content slide, and we're going to have a few different areas to cover. So one is, hey, if you got to go, I get it, right? I'm just going to give you everything in one slide up front, and if you need to run, it's totally cool. First one. And then I'm going to give you sort of, let's rethink product management and really what it means and what it entails. So I'm going to give you my version or flavor of that. And then next is, I've seen a lot of videos, and I know that a lot of people have tried to give a description of like, okay, well, what do PMs do, right? And I tried to approach this from a slightly different angle, which is, hey, why don't we actually have a framework for this? And then anytime you come up with a potential role or opportunity that you think might be interesting to you as a PM, you can use this framework and say, okay, of that role, are there going to be aspects there that I really enjoy doing, and would I be interested in that PM role? Because PM is really diverse, and we'll get into the why and a little bit of the nuts and bolts behind that. And then next slide, 16 on, is we're going to go through some questions, and we're going to put all those lenses on there. So an engineering lens, a design lens, and a business lens, right, which are all aspects that PMs use to try and solve problems and deliver customer value. And then finally, if we have some time, I'll give you some fun stuff and sort of my personal story. Okay. And then let's see, I've got a couple other things here. Oh yeah, equally important is what today isn't about. Okay, so if you're tuned in today to, hoping to get like, how would you answer some sample interview questions, not being covered today. I saw the Product Buds YouTube channel has some stuff from Steven from Exponent and Kenton from Rocket Blocks. I briefly watched some of that content, and I actually agree with a lot of what they said. So if you're looking specifically for, hey, how do I actually answer interview questions, I would direct you that way. Okay, today's talk is not about that. What today is about is really, how do you take these three disciplines and apply them to get a deeper understanding of the problems and how you might be able to deliver solutions for those problems. All right, so this is my thing, right? Like, if you got to run, I get it. Not really, but like, if you got to run, go, right? But if you stay, we're gonna try to have some fun, okay? But if you take away nothing else, right? This is the slide that you can screenshot, you can watch later on YouTube and just be like, okay, I got this. So it really comes down to three things for today. And the first thing is, in technology, I generally believe 80-20 rule. As product managers, you're really here to solve two problems for customers, right? One is, you're solving some stepping stone to them achieving their dream, whatever that dream is, right? It could be just a slide deck, it could be financial management, it could be their ultimate like job and being productive at their job, but whatever it is, it's doing it with them, right? And now you're probably thinking, okay, well, wait a minute, like that can't be just these two things, right? But here's how I would frame it for you is, the things that are do it with me, right? They're ultimately little tasks that you're helping them achieve to get to some bigger goal, right? Do it with me is things like, well, I need a way to remember things. So I need a note-taking app, right? So I've given you a service or a capability to go ahead and do it, right? But I, as the technology being used, I'm doing it with you, right? And then the second problems we usually solve are, you lighten their load or lighten their minds, right? You do it so that they don't have to, they being the customer or the user in this case, right? And so this could be like, hey, you know what? It used to be a lot of manual effort to pull information back in, 10 years ago, to pull information from 6 different spreadsheets that were emailed to me from 6 different people. Well, that problem doesn't exist anymore, mostly if you're using, say, Google Spreadsheets or some online cloud software, right? Because everyone can be in the same spreadsheet editing at the same exact time. So that is an example of, oh, it could be do it with me, but actually you've just completely eliminated the need to manage 6 separate spreadsheets and email them, right? So it's gone, like it's been dealt with. And then the last angle is, increasingly, the benefits that technology offers in today's age with privacy in mind is that it must far outweigh any less good aspects. So the examples I want to highlight for you here is, knowing what we know today about, let's say, FOMO, right, which is the fear of missing out, and cyberbullying, would we have designed some apps and services the way they were designed today, right? I don't have an answer to that, but I think it's something that's becoming increasingly important in our society. Okay, The next thing, and I've hinted at this for everyone, is the reason product management is hard to understand is it's honestly a spectrum of roles and capabilities. And ultimately, there's an exercise that you as an individual have to do to let your skills and experiences sort of determine or influence the type of PM role that you pursue, regardless of what company, right? Sorry, 1 second. Okay. So just to some of the moderators, FYI, I'm unable to access chat on my other computer. So if stuff comes up, please just like chime in.
Yep, we'll let you
Okay,
know.
thank you guys. All right, and then last is product managers and the discipline religiously begs, borrows, and steals from all those disciplines that I mentioned. And you not only do you work from those disciplines, but you actually work with many more organizational functions. Okay, so that's it. If you got to go, I totally get it. But we're going to take a pause here, and I'm about to make a very, 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 very bold claim, right? So this is it. Let's rethink actually what product management is. So whatever you have in your mind of what product management is, here's how I would propose and frame it for you is it is completely valid interpretation of product management. The thing is, you have to recognize it is but one point on a spectrum of what product management could be. Okay. And so here we go. Product management, I claim, is really a spectrum of roles and responsibilities, right? Every company gets to decide what combination of those roles and responsibilities they place upon their PM function. And so as a result of that, PM functions, no matter where you are, generally may share some common themes or responsibilities or roles, but what you ultimately come to realize is that there's no mold, right? And thus anyone with the right combination of skills and the right match to the role and the company can enter the world of product management. Okay, that's a super bold claim, right? And so now your question to me is, okay, well, wait, you got to prove that, right? So that's what we're going to do. Okay, so let's break it down and let's look in the next slide from left to right. Okay. All right. So really, product management, in my opinion, is a permutation of these 4 characteristics or attributes. Okay. And it starts with you, right? No 2 people are going to be exactly the same. Everyone comes with their unique set of skills and experiences. And then what happens is, as I claimed, right, PM is really a spectrum. And where you fall on that spectrum, you know, is going to be a little bit based on your skills, experiences, and how you want to grow yourself, right? But that spectrum I have at the bottom there is, on the one hand, you're a very technical, you're aiming for a very technical product management role, right? You have an engineering background. You understand what it would take to get YouTube videos to stop buffering, right? You understand what you've maybe even done in a previous career or lifetime, build Oracle databases from scratch, right? There are definitely certain product managers who will never be able to comprehend or understand that, nor do they need to, right? Because it's not going to be the area that they're interested in. On the other side of the coin is product managers who maybe come from more of a business or MBA background, right? And here, what they're going to be more familiar with is maybe they're going to be really strong in how do you take a product to market? How do you figure out like the pricing and the strategy and how to deliver physical products to people's hands or, you know, product shelves at your local retail stores? Okay. So then we'll move to the third column. And the third column, as I've claimed before, right, is every company gets to decide the responsibilities that they want their PM function to take on. And then lastly is, well, that's going to be a determination of the product or service that that company wants to launch, right? So that's why I say it's a spectrum, is because any of these permutations are possible. And so now what I want to do is let's work at it in reverse, right? So just to give you an idea of how many different flavors there are, if you think about, okay, how many industries or product or services could there be? There's a lot, right? So let's just use a proxy of, I'm using as a proxy, when I use my credit card at the end of the year, my credit card company usually buckets things into like roughly 10 categories, right? And those 10 categories, let's call them like industries. There's always a sub industry, or, you know, hey, we're in the logistics of delivering physical goods, we're in the logistics of like delivering meals, what have you, right? So let's just say 10 industries, but every industry has at least like one sub vertical or sub industry. So 10 times 2 is 20. So let's just say there's like roughly on the right hand side, there are 20 different industry sub industries. Okay. Now, responsibilities, we're going to get to this, but responsibilities, I claim there are generally fall into 4 buckets, right? So, and when you start out as a younger PM or a more junior PM, those 4 buckets of responsibilities, you'll only usually be given 2 of those 4. You won't be responsible for all 4 of them, usually. And so if we do 20 different products and services or industries times 4 different possibilities that you might have, right? But you have 2 of those possibilities. So it's actually a 4 factorial, right? So it's of the 4, you choose 1, and then of the 3, you're going to get another, the 3 remaining, you're going to get another one. So it's actually, if you do the factorial, it's 20 times 4 times 3. So you're already at, what is that, 240, right? And then the PM spectrum, I said there's 3 types there, roughly, right? So now you're at 240 times 3. What is that, 750 minus 37, so 720. So there are 720 different permutations if you just use this simplified model that I've done, right? And that's why product management is so hard to describe, but as well, it offers so many different possibilities to you, all right? Okay. Any questions, or am I good to move forward, moderators?
No questions yet. You can go forward.
Okay, great. Okay. And so today, I think where I'll be able to provide the most value to everyone is we're just going to explore one area, right? And my rationale is at the bottom of the slide, which is your toolbox. This is going to be more than anything influenced by, you know, the experiences you decide to go pursue, mentorships, what you study, and your general interests, right? The spectrum, you probably have a rough answer of where you fall on that spectrum. And on the far right, you probably have a pretty good idea of what your short list of companies you might be interested in. So where I think I can provide the most net new knowledge to share with you guys is framing those responsibilities under, and I'm, you know, we'll get to this, but under the 4 categories that I alluded to earlier. Okay. So let's get into those 4 areas, right? And before we start, just really quick, you're going to see some bubbles in the top right of the next set of slides. And those are the acronyms. So engineering, design, business disciplines, okay? All right, so these are what I would roughly, for 80%, again, applying an 80% 80-20 rule, these are roughly the 4 buckets of responsibilities for anything that you'll sort of do in product management, okay? And the first one, why, is actually just that, why. Constantly asking yourself why. It's, in fact, such an important aspect of product management that it's not even an acronym, right? It's just literally the word why. If you look at everything else, it's an acronym that I've given you. But why is just straight why, okay? The next one, PLM, product lifecycle management. This is the one where people think of as the bread and butter of technology product development, right? Which is product managers working with software engineers, building and developing software. But as you've seen, it's only, what I'm claiming to be is one of actually 4 buckets that you might do as a PM, right? Depending on the mix and where you go. But it's an important one, and it's one that's usually regarded as what PMs most often do. But it's not the only thing, as we'll see, that product managers do. The third bucket is go to market, right? So we and maybe a lot of people, when you're exploring this field, you tend to think, oh, okay, as a product manager, I work with engineers, we build stuff, and then we like send it out the door, right? But send it out the door doesn't mean anything unless you have a strategy for where it goes, right? Do people go and download something? Do they go to a web URL and interact with it? Is it a physical smart speaker that they have to go physically purchase and then replace and swap something from their home to use it? So go to market, depending on what it is that you're building, right, can have huge implications. And there's a lot to understand there if you're just a pure software PM or a PM who builds software that runs on hardware, or you're building or managing software that runs in like clouds or server environments, right? And then lastly, there's portfolio management. This is something that I think isn't emphasized enough in our industry and in our discipline, but I'll get into this. I don't want to reveal too much of it, but it's the idea that as product managers, we will always have a limited amount of resources to deploy and use to build things and do the work, right? And you have to be very careful and very intentional and thoughtful about how you use those resources. That's the idea behind portfolio management. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to put this in a slightly different way that might be a lot easier for most of you to understand. Because again, this is a framework that I've built and I've modeled for you, right? But it might be easier to actually map this to another model that everyone is super familiar with. So it's the 5 W's, right? So why is why, right? The product lifecycle management, this is what we think of as traditional product managers. And it's, okay, cool. We know the why, we know all that stuff. What is it that we're going to go build, right? That whole cycle is, okay, this is what we're going to go build, and this is what we're going to like put out in the public, right? The go-to-market is, okay, well, how are you going to get that to customers and users' hands, right? And the portfolio management, interestingly, when I mentioned this resources, right? You're always, like I said, going to have more things you could do than the resources available to you. So you almost have to sequence everything, right? It's almost like prioritization and say, okay, well, which ones do we do first? And that's kind of really a question of when, right? When should we do this? Maybe the answer is never, right? Or maybe the answer is yesterday. Okay, and then who and where, kind of obvious, right? Now, some of you might look at this and you might actually say, okay, wait a minute, but like, I think of the product lifecycle management is of how, right? Like, how are we going to go build this? And so the reason I framed the GTM or go to market as how is, think about it this way. Go to market couldn't really be the what, right? Go to market is not the what are we going to build, right? The only PLM can answer that. So that's why I've phrased it that way. Again, this is a model, right? It's not the North Star truth, but it helps you think about, hey, if an opportunity for you came up in product management somewhere, you could kind of use this and ask yourself, well, wait a minute, what company is it? What's the service? What do they allow their PM function to do as far as roles and responsibilities? And how does that fit into this? And then of this, what's most interesting for me, right? That I personally want to do as a product manager. So. Okay, so let's dig into each of them, right? So now what you see is you're going to see the 4 tabs at the top, and they each represent one of the areas that I've called out, and we're going to go through them one by one, okay? And we're just going to do a quick little mini deep dive on them. So the why, and for each of them, I kind of give you, okay, well, what would success look like, right? A very high level measure of that. So here, my proxy for this is, well, it's not about, and mind you, this is very important, I believe, but it's not about what is the problem. As a junior product manager, and when you first start out, we tend to focus on, okay, this is the problem, right? And you try to explain that. But really, that's not the value, right? The value is, okay, you as a team now recognize the problem and you need to develop a solution. But when you put this out there in the world, what customers care about is like not what's the problem. They know they have the problem, right? They're looking to you for the solution and the value they get out of trusting and using your product or service. So really, the success metric is anyone can understand the customer value, not the problem, but the customer value. And I break this down into 3 rough categories, right? So the why is iterative, and you're never going to get it usually right on your first try. But the question really is, why focus on this customer? Why solve this specific problem, right? Thinking with the other bucket in your mind of like, I have limited resources, right? And why this solution? Why is this the right one? There could be 3, 4 different solutions, right? And that's why there exist many companies trying to do the same thing sometimes or working in the same space. So you kind of have to really challenge yourself and ask yourself, like, why these 3 things? And my tip here is if you get stuck, right, relax all the assumptions, right, and start with the question of just how might we, no matter how crazy the idea is. Here, what I'm doing is the how might we really borrows from the discipline of design. And for those of you familiar enough or have some background in design, I'm basically referring to like a double diamond approach, right? Which is you relax all assumptions and you go wide and you explore even the most remotely possible, craziest, most remote ideas. But by going wide and expanding everyone's thinking, what happens is then you look at the world and you say, oh, okay, well, I hadn't thought about it from these angles. So maybe what if we stitch these 2 ideas together? And usually that's the iteration process that helps drive things forward to the next level. Okay, and then last thing I will call out here is notice I mentioned in the beginning of this section the 3 acronyms. So up here, what I'm saying is, this part of the process, right? If this is something that you're interested in, it doesn't really matter what your background is, right? Whether it's engineering, engineering, design, or business, you're going to use all these skills or borrow these disciplines to answer these questions. Okay, so keep that in mind because you'll keep seeing those bubbles in the top right. Okay, so next let's move over to what we think of as the bread and butter of product managers, right? So this is not a representative example of like the life cycle of software development. There are many, many, many kinds. This is just one of them that's simplified, but they all represent some flavor of this, right? And it starts kind of in the top right there with explore. And in fact, explore, right? One way you can think of this is explore is so important that you give time to yourself and your team to just explore what's possible, that what I actually did was I pulled it out as the why. So if it helps you, think of the why as the explore phase of software development lifecycle. Otherwise, you can think of it as just, hey, this is just an area of interest that we want to do some research and we think has some potential, right? And then we toss it into this lifecycle and we say, okay, well, this is the problem engineering and design. Let's explore this further, right? So explore could be a continued iteration of the why, or it could be the why itself. It's not really too important. It's just important to recognize that the whole thing is an iteration of each other, right? Okay, so the important thing I want to emphasize here is my bar or my proxy for success, right? This is not something that you just put out there and say, this is what we're doing, okay? This is something that the team has to align on, both the development process and for when things get tough, what are the principles on which you will make decisions to be able to move the project forward, right? And then you follow through and everyone agrees and actually follows the process. Here, what's important to realize is as product managers, especially when you're junior, no one reports to you, but you work with everybody. You work with marketing, legal, design, engineering, other functions I can't even recall right now. But it's very important that you master the ability to guide this development process, especially because no one reports to you, right? So it's crucial there that you develop those skill sets at some point in your stage of becoming a product manager. Okay, and then one other question I thought you might ask is, okay, well, this is interesting, but if you've looked into this area, you might think, okay, there's agile, there's waterfall, there's some what people call it the software development lifecycle. Which one is better, right? And my proposition to you is it doesn't matter. Having one is better than having none. So just pick one. If your organization doesn't have one, pick one and just move forward with it versus having zero. Okay. Go to market. So those of you who come from a business background will be more familiar with this, but I've tried to make it as simple as possible. At the most basic level, getting products to customers has two dimensions that I've listed here, right? And it actually, some people may think these are the same thing, but marketing and sales, in my world, in my view, in my humble opinion, are actually two different things, right? And so the left is really about, hey, we know this customer value and what we can deliver really well. How do we go and let the whole world know about it, right? That's really what the left side is about. And my proxy for this is customers, when you get it in their hands, they are really excited to describe the value in their own words. So they don't repeat what's on your website. They don't repeat the marketing material, but they, in their own way, described how they've benefited from what you've done, right? That's your proxy and bar for when you know you've got marketing success, right? And the best products in the world out there let you feel that in some way. That's your bonus point that you want to pursue, right? That's super hard to do, and I'm not saying it's by any measure easy, but if you can get to that level, you know you've created a market for your product or service. Okay, so let's move on to the right side. The right side is you may be in an organization where you have an entire sales function dedicated to moving your product, right? This might be more typical in an enterprise situation, but here you need to make sure that the team has the right information, right? Like they're going to go out there and they're going to do stuff on your behalf, and you want to make sure that that team is fully powered and equipped to do what they need to do. And that usually comes down to talking points, a release guide, right? Internal notes of like, here's the main value propositions, and demos, right? The bonus point, usually as a junior or young product manager, you will not get involved in this, but it depends on the organization, right? But sometimes there's an incentive structure for sales teams to push the product in a certain way, especially enterprise. And if that isn't aligned well, then you've got a sales team who isn't really interested in pushing your product at its basic, core, right? And so if that is a thing for your organization, you need to be very aware of it. Hopefully, as a younger PM, this is not something you deal with, but just be aware that it is possible and it may be a detriment to sales success. Let's see, is there anything else I want to mention here? Okay, one more point for you guys on this slide, which is on the left, going back to marketing success. So if you don't get customers really excited and them describing in their own words what you've done for them, my proposition to help you here is go back to the why, right? Go back to the why and start there. Say, like, did we get some assumptions wrong, right? Was there something we missed here? Was there an assumption we made where we said, hey, this is not a priority, or this isn't as important of a customer problem, but in reality, when you give it to them, it turns out there is, right? And some combination of feedback, research, and really listening again to the customer, or having an opening conversation with them again will help you there.
Hey Q, there's a question in the chat from Iris. She asked,
Okay.
how do you push for a product that may not be the best for sales success?
Tell me a little bit more.
Yeah,
Iris, would
thank
you
you.
want to unmute and say?
Yeah, for sure. So thanks for answering my question. And
Hi.
my question is, hi. So I work at a nonprofit. I'm working on a nonprofit at Opomio. And at a nonprofit, not every product you push is for profit, of course. We're doing it for the social good. So I wonder, if you were to work in a bigger company and you want to push for a product that is not necessarily for profitability, how do you push for that? And how do you convey like the higher management when it's not for bottom line?
Yeah. So I think this is something that if you take a step back outside of product management, right? I think this is something that actually marketing as a function encounters all the time, right? And so like I'm going to make up some numbers, right? This is not representative of my employer or anything, but marketing will say, hey, we need to invite press in and do like a whole half-day demo, and we need to rent this space that's super expensive in this super tall building, right? Like, how do you justify that, right? Uh, I think my proposal to you is go back to the metrics and ask yourself, okay, if revenue is not a metric that this will improve, what other metric does the organization care about that actually we could move the needle with marketing, right? And sometimes it's like marketing people understand this 100%, but sometimes it's things such as like brand awareness or recognition, right? In the customer service world, there's something called CSAT, which is like a proxy for customer satisfaction. How happy are they? Would this move the CSAT score, right? So figure out at the end of the day, like what you're delivering as a service or product has to push and improve some metric out there, right? And maybe the answer is revenue is just not it, but that's okay. There's lots of products whose goal, right, is not to make money. Gmail being a clear example of one, right?
Yeah, that's cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to the next one. And then I've only got like, what are we, 13? It's like 5-6 more slides, and then we can like jump into everything else. Okay, last one, portfolio management. So this is an equation. I made this up. So like it needs to be tested by like all of you and hundreds of PMs out there, but I'm pretty sure it'll hold, which is there's one equation to hold to when you think about portfolio management. And I alluded to it already, right? Pick your metric, whatever it is, revenue, traffic, usage, etc. The value you get, right, the incremental delta or the X% improvement is greater than the resources used. Now, how you calculate that equation is going to be up to your product, your organization, and your company, and what's important, right? But at a very fundamental sort of level, if what you deliver is greater than the resources consumed, you're golden, like you're on a rocket ship, right? There are companies who take years to get there. But whether you're a young PM, right? So my example's on the left, and you're reviewing 100 feature requests, or you're a senior PM and you have to decide if you are going to allocate 5 engineers to go explore this possibility, right? It comes back to this. It comes back to how you basically solve this equation. As a young PM, you're probably going to be more feature requests, prioritization, stack ranking. Hopefully, if you're having to make decisions about funding projects, you've got some senior PMs to work and collaborate with on that, and they can show you the ropes a little bit about how they think of that. But I think this is the least understood aspect of product management, but a critical one, especially as you get more senior. And you can see in the top right that business people are super excelled and capable of handling because usually they get some sort of like portfolio theory or finance 101 type training, right? That can be sort of applied here. Okay, so let's go back to the presentation topic, right? Which is, as Darsh had mentioned, what's important? Is it engineering? Is it design? Is it business? And basically, hopefully, I've shown you some qualitative data here that basically spells out it's not about one being the other, right? It's about at different moments and different roles and responsibilities, you use and borrow heavily from these disciplines. But customer value, right, and customer problems get solved only when you collaborate with all of these disciplines. Cool. Big pause. That's it. Big wow. Everyone like, is this the moment? And you're like, yeah, okay, cool. We get it. This is like very different. This could survive on YouTube for 18 months and we're not going to see someone do this again for 18 months at least, right? All right. So let's go attack some questions. Remember, this is not about how would you answer an interview question, right? This is, you're a product manager and let's go look at something and let's go break it down. Let's put on the lens of engineering, design, and business. How do we answer this? All right. So this one is super pertinent And basically what I'm looking for is I can see, by the way, I can see chat now, so we're good. So if you chat or you want to unmute, like I really want participation in this next section. Cool? All right. So wash your hands, right? Super important. That's why we're all on this call right now, basically, right? The CDC's guideline is 20 seconds. So somewhere in there is go wash your hands for 20 seconds, right? Somewhere in there. What can we do? So anybody, you can chat, you can unmute, be responsible, like be courteous, but take any lens, right? Take an engineering lens, take a business lens, take a design lens. And trick question, there may not be, one of the lenses here may not be relevant, okay? So like you don't have to answer all three. But what can we do here? Like go back to the why. Why are we doing this? Like what's going on?
Q, I have a question. Does it have to be limited to like a poster?
No. So good question, right? The important thing here is we're getting out information. Information can occur across multiple mediums. This was just literally, I pulled this from the CDC's website as something I think people are supposed to like print out and like put somewhere.
Mm-hmm. I have a quick idea for this. Essentially, like I think there's way too much text. So
yeah.
Perhaps there could be more visual elements. For example, if you wash your hands under 10 seconds, like a picture of people, the amount of bacteria that they have in a hand, like just literally a picture of a hand with the amount of bacteria shaded on it for when it's under 20 seconds, and when it's over 20 seconds to show how clean it is, to kind of give a more visual representation of like.
Okay, so like design, right? Design is like you're using the lens of design and you're saying, man, if someone just walks by, would they understand what's going on? No. Okay, so let's redesign that, right? Like, excellent. Cool, thank you.
From another design aspect, specifically like color theory wise, brown and like the weird green color that they have going on here is not the most like visually attractive. Like blues are more calming, like reds are more so that was the first thing that jumped out at me. I was just like, why brown?
So good. Okay, so also I can't see everyone. So like your name would be super helpful. And then what lens, and then talk away. But like,
by the way.
Hi. Cool.
Hi.
Yeah, awesome.
Hi, I'm Iris again. So I think I want to focus on the business lens, which is focusing on a why, because cool. The reason why we want to wash hands is because there are like millions of people dying out there. And so if we can put a very shocking stats about like just how many people are dying because people are not washing hands and because they got sick, I think that would be more touching, and maybe some stats about like it only takes you like 10 seconds to wash the hands, whereas you're literally going to be saving lives if things like that happen. So focusing on a why. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so thank you, Iris. Yes, so what you said is like from a business lens, right? Like, why don't we just pull in some data? Like there are obviously, tragic mortalities happening daily, right? Like some number there, but you guys are as a group already working together, right? And you're bringing in all these elements from these disciplines, right? Design, like color, right? Like, yeah, red is terrible. Red is like think red light, right? It's like no one wants a red light. Everyone wants a green light. Like, why would you do that, right? Text is like, yeah, now that I'm looking on chat, text is small. The heading isn't very compelling. Great, right? So this is really about go back to the why, right? We just all want to go back to normal lives, right? Like it's a pretty like basic fundamental why. So the faster we can get this information out, the better, right? So there's a hypothesis there. There's another hypothesis that you need to make it easy, right? So people can remember when they're actually in the act of washing their hands, right? So there's a couple of things that you can build already right there. This is awesome. I'm gonna skip forward one slide, and I think you guys are just gonna like laugh at this. But what I will tell you is this poster is real. It is on the CDC website. The source is down there in the bottom left. And the next poster or like medium is also real. But before I show it, take a mental image or reflection of how you feel about this. And then when I show you the next one, I just want like anybody, just how do you feel, emojis, whatever, right? You guys ready? I see smiles, I have people nodding. Like, this makes sense, right? So what's different here? And my proposition is to the left, right?
It's very personable, and you can literally see the scene happening in your head.
Yeah. Yeah, it's there, right? The text is bigger, 20 seconds, finally, I know where that piece of information is. But sorry, I think I interrupted someone.
Oh, I just wanted to say that I agree. Like the setting the scene in someone's mind, like I envisioned doing that because it's something that, I mean, at least most people can envision, like chopping onions or chopping like really hot peppers and crying. So especially for contact users, as a contact user, like that's something that I really identified with. So being able to relate, make the story and like the idea relate to as many people as possible, like makes the value higher.
Yeah. So what you're seeing here is you're actually seeing a few elements of familiarity, is what I call it, right? And I'll point it out to you guys. One is slicing, excuse me, jalapenos, or as I like to say, jalapenos, right? If you've ever done this and then touched your eye, oh my gosh, like you will remember that forever, right? So that
And
just
it's very
evokes,
impactful. The text over there, it's very impactful.
right? Yeah,
None of us wants to do that, right?
yeah. Like even if you've never done it, it evokes such this strong reaction. You're like, yeah, I'm gonna remember this one, right? So familiarity, right? They put it in a context where you may have experienced slicing jalapenos and touching your eye or whatever, right? And then the next thing is y'all. Notice how they ended that sentence. That's like 20 seconds of scrubbing y'all, right? Because this is Texas, right? And I don't know where Round Rock is exactly, but y'all is very representative and familiar to all Texans, right? So this element of familiarity just gave you such a different experience, right, than what the CDC threw out, right? And then finally, they wove the whole thing into a story. Like, I'm assuming Texans eat a lot of nachos, right? Which is why they picked this maybe. But what they did was they put it all in the story and it just makes sense, right? It's like, oh yeah, eating nachos, you definitely slice jalapenos and you definitely do not want to put it anywhere near your eyes, right? Like, I'm gonna remember that, right? And I know all of you now are gonna go take this example and show it at some time in the future, right? Awesome. Okay. Next one. So this is totally different. This has actually been around for a long time, believe it or not, 2005. And if you've never heard of it, Bank of America, which is a retail bank, they have a program called Keep the Change. Interesting story or background on this is IDEO. It's a design strategy firm who now has merged with other companies. But back in the day, there was some pretty hot stuff, and they were known for doing a lot of experience design. They actually were the guys that came up with this for Bank of America. So Bank of America hired them, and this is what IDEO came up with. The idea is the following, right? And this is important. So this is the one detail you need to remember is Bank of America came to IDEO and they said, hey, we want more people, we want more accounts opened at Bank of America, right? Just volume. It was a volume play. We just need more bank accounts. So the idea here from IDEO was, hey, when you use your debit card, we will round up your purchase to the next dollar. So if your purchase was $6.25, they would round it up to $7. And that 75 cents difference gets automatically put into a savings account, right? So your debit card or your bank account gets subtracted $7 from it. $6.25 goes to whoever you bought the thing from, and 75 cents ends up in a savings account that you own. That's it. That's the whole idea, right? So now I've given you the what did Bank of America want, okay? So Bank of America wanted volume. They just wanted more bank accounts. Is this a success? Why? And like, please, if you don't mind, name, lens, and then give me what you think.
I would say like there's a lot of reading, there's a lot of text in there. So unless like if you came onto this page with the incentive of figuring out something about how to save better, maybe you'd read into it. But if you're just someone who landed on this page, perhaps you won't. So in order to improve it, if there could be a more visual element of how the compounding of the savings could actually lead to an effect, a positive effect, and you might like be scrolling and be like, oh, that looks cool. Like, let me check it out. I'm wary of how many people who stumble on this page might actually click and read.
Okay, good points. I apologize. I merely pulled this because this was what is on today's version of the website. My question is the idea, right? So the whole product, the keep the change as a product, is it successful? And so I'm expecting you all to ask me questions about like, well, like, you know, X number or like what else, right? So I give you one detail. So we're not critiquing the website, we're critiquing the program, right? So, and I gave you the one detail was Bank of America's goal was get more people to open accounts. Okay, go.
Well, Samantha, again, from a business lens, the first question would be like, did it work? Did the volume of like bank accounts grow? Did that happen?
Okay, yeah, so last I checked, I don't remember the number of bank accounts, but it was significant enough that it seemed like they achieved it. But I can tell you the dollar amount I remember specifically was north of $2 billion of savings to those people.
Hi, Bryce here. The question I would ask is, how does it compare cost effectiveness wise with other methods of like opening up bank accounts?
Yeah. Okay. So a savings account for a bank, I'm gonna make an assumption, is pretty usually like low cost, right? Like I may be wrong, but let's just assume that you cannot have a debit card against a savings account. Like a savings account is like you must go online or go into the bank itself to pull money from. And so like servicing and the cost of servicing is pretty low, such that if you were to choose or encourage opening of a certain account, savings account is a cost-effective one for the bank.
Hey, this is Camille here. I just wanted to ask a follow-up question in terms of this. So they're trying to open up more bank accounts, or they're trying to open up more savings accounts. So essentially, is it their current customers, they want to open another account for savings, or they want to grow, like, I don't know, their total bank account number from new customers?
Yeah. So for this program to work, you have to have an existing debit card and a checking account, right? Otherwise, you have no way to like give a merchant a debit card to make a transaction. So yes, you have to be an existing customer and you have to have a checking account. And this is basically, oh, do you want to also add a savings account, right? That's, I'm guessing, how they got most of the accounts.
So it seems that 2 billion additional savings, right? It seems like a substantial enough number, but you'd obviously have to benchmark that from what they had before. And is this like, how big proportionally is this an increase to what was there before? And then if it was statistically significant, then I suppose you could, then decide, oh, it was successful or it was not, and then benchmark it to maybe other programs that different banks have and compare it to that.
Yeah. So you guys are getting at some really detailed stuff, and that's good. Let's go back. Sorry. Let's go back to this, right? So we roughly know, I think we answered the first question, is we roughly know that the easiest way to get more volume of accounts, right, is probably existing customers who have a checking account with them, right? That's at least where you would start, because it's the least effort, right, to get an existing customer to open a savings account versus, hey, someone from competitor bank X, right? Why don't you bring everything over here and open 2 accounts with me? So I'd argue like we kind of know why this group of customer, why solve this problem, right? So now go back to Bank of America, and I mentioned that their goal was to just get more bank accounts, right? Just pure volume. But now, like, what I would say is, even before you dive into the details, the question here is, well, so what? Right? Like what did opening more accounts do? Like who is incentivized to open more accounts? If you take Bank of America as a whole, right, and you just like apply a little bit, one more layer here, what happened? So, okay, customer X of Bank of America, have $100 sitting in my checking account, right? I go to a merchant and I spend $9.50. So that rounds up to $10. So 50 cents would go to my savings account, right? So wait a minute. All that really happened is $9.50 went to the merchant, which is correct because you made a purchase. And the 50 cents, right, instead of showing up in your checking account, now just got transferred to your savings account. So net at the end of the day, I didn't get a customer, or nor did I convince a customer to give me more deposits, more money at the account, right? It just went from one account to another account. So that's weird, right? Like if you think about a bank, more account, more money, more interest. Yeah, if you think about a bank usually would want to encourage you to like put more money in the bank. But here what they did was they took 50 cents from a checking account and just put it in a savings account. So either that wasn't the goal, or they totally missed the goal and like this was the wrong thing to do, right? But that's, that's a PM, right? That's us aspiring product managers really applying a business lens to all of this, right? Like what was the goal? If the goal was to earn profitability, it'd be hard to argue that this did it, right? Because we just moved numbers from one account to another. We didn't actually increase money in a bank, which then a bank could take and reloan out for some interest, right? So it gets really interesting, right? This is why it's hard to say engineering, design, or business. No, it's like it's all three, right? But somehow, as I've mentioned to you guys today, this still exists. This is the website today, and it's been launched in 2005. So I'm guessing, right, that getting more deposits from customers into the bank is not the goal, right? I'm guessing there was some other goal here, and that's why it's still around, right? But we don't know what that is. But it's just interesting, right? Like we all mentioned some things. I just gave you a business lens example that, okay, like clearly, getting more money or profitability was not the goal here. Because if that was the goal, I would never bother encouraging a customer to open another account that I have to service, right? Retention, that's an interesting one. Yeah, it might be. We have to explore it, right? But the other side of the coin is, keep in mind too, if I was in charge of this, right, or if we were in charge of this, it's not just about the bank. There's got to be some benefit to the customer, right? So what does the customer get out of this? They now, instead of one account, have two accounts to manage. And all you did was just move 50 cents from here to there. Like, is that customer value? Maybe, right? But like, we'd have to think about that. And maybe it is, maybe there's a way to phrase it, but maybe there isn't. So anyways, it's saving habits. Yeah, like, so I think there was something there along that dimension. I do agree with that caused them to, and still operate this today. Yeah, happiness metric, like we kind of have to dig into that, right? But none of what I just said and none of what we just discussed has anything, we haven't even dove into like, how would you solve this from an engineering perspective, right? Like, how would you literally do this? So anyways, just like really interesting things to think about. Lastly, appendix. So I thought this was funny, and I used a lot of icons that I borrowed from the Noun project, so I have to attribute it because I want to do the right thing as someone with a design background. But anyways, I put together just a quick small doc. These are things that I've personally found helpful. They're either websites or books that I would recommend across the various disciplines if you're interested in further reading. And then lastly is, I listened to a bunch of music while putting this together and had a lot of fun. Thank you guys. I hope you guys end the year on a top well note. And at this point, I am done presenting, so we can open it up.
Hey, Alex, thank you so much. That was a really good talk. And I think I learned a lot from it, especially the perspective of how you retrace into whether you're applying a tech, business, or business lens, because that is something that I feel I've made a mistake in past. But anyways, we are at time, so we do realize if anybody wants to leave, but we have several questions here lined up from our audience for Alex. So we are going to go ahead and answer those questions. So let me just share my
I feel Camille on the John Bellion. Yes, definitely.
No problem. So Alex, I'm just going to go over through questions. There might be some related to the Google APM or Google PM. If it's not something you're comfortable answering, please let us know. No problem.
Yeah, sure problem.
Okay. So our first question is, what's your take on the main differences and similarities between consulting and product management, since you have experience in both?
Yeah, okay. Very quickly, because this one doesn't need a big answer, but I think the main thing is if you're deciding a career, which I assume is the heart of the question between the two, one will give you way more exposure to a lot of different industries, clients, organizational cultures, and you'll probably hopefully get some, when things go to normal, travel benefits out of this. And so you'll just get a broad range of experiences. But if you're interested in something that is start to finish, and I really want to own it and shape it and influence it in a way that just consultants can't, right? Because you're not building it, then I would encourage you to consider product management.
Okay. So our next question is, what certification or courses do you think would be helpful for applying to the Google APM program? Do you recommend any certain kind of courses or any skills that one can pick up through certifications or of any kind?
So I have never personally done any like product specific certification or courses. So I can't speak to the quality or one versus the other. What I would say is, as a result of my time in PM, I did go forth and decide to pursue a master's degree in human-computer interaction and design, so HCI, just like Darsh and a few others here on the call. And I was super satisfied with that. But that comes from an understanding of my personal toolbox, right? As well as then where did I want to go within the spectrum of PM. And so I would let that be your sort of guide to deciding like, hey, do I really need to pick or develop skills here? And would that course or certification help me along those lines?
Yep, that perfectly makes sense. As Alex said, that it really depends on what you're good at. If you're good at tech, maybe gaining something on design. If you're good at business, maybe gaining some knowledge on design or tech, that might help. So our next question is, if anyone can become a PM, how do you recommend standing out when applying for PM roles?
Yeah, if we get to it at the end, I'm happy to tell you sort of like my personal story, which I think will help with this a lot. But I think for purposes of moving through more questions, my recommendation here is to stand out. You can do a couple things, right? You can be really great in any one of those four sort of buckets that I showed as PM roles and responsibilities. But the other thing that I haven't really accounted for is you really are an expert in a certain domain of knowledge, right? And so what I mean by that is like, think of an industry like financial technology, fintech, right? Or for me, it was, man, like if you need to know what like building internet in Africa is like, there's not very many people who have that skill or knowledge, right? So you can develop a specific set or domain of knowledge that is relevant for a company that you're interested in or relevant for a space that you're interested in, right? And my example is just like one very clear, obvious one, but there's others out there like, fintech, like I said. If you're really interested in logistics, right? There's flavors of logistics, but that's how you can stand out is you actually go get a job or go get experience that's relevant to that domain or what that company's products and services are in the field of.
Completely makes sense. So next question is from Iris. What advice do you have for interviewing for PM positions at X, Everyday Robot Project?
I assume this is like Google X. Is that right, Iris?
I'm assuming so.
Google X.
Okay. I have some familiarity with Google X. I can't really talk specifics per se, but I can tell you, I guess, like interviewing in general, right? I don't think there's anything unique for X that wasn't already mentioned in some of the other Product Buds videos from like Kenton and I can't remember his name, but like the framework and the approach that they gave you in those talks, I actually mostly agree with, and I would just recommend that you tailor that to whatever the question is that they're asking you, right? Because they're not, I mean, they may ask something that's relevant to something that they're working on, but I mean, it's still going to be a question that you know nothing about, right? Like I could ask you in an interview, so there's this like London retailer, right? Like Currys, and they are basically the Best Buy of London, solve problem X for them. Like even I don't know anything there, right? But if you use the frameworks and tailor that to the question, it's no different. So
Yeah, for sure.
I do agree. And also, like every, I guess, PM interview is kind of a brainstorming session. So you have to give it a flavor of your own taste. So our next question is, do you have any pro tips for people who are applying specifically for the APM program? This can be resources, approach, prep, anything that you would want to mention.
So I don't have anything specific for the APM program. I think you should just treat it as any other interview of a company at a company you're interested in. Regarding resources, that link, that last slide with the link and the QR code, that is to a doc where I have not only like interview resources, some books that I use to prepare for my interviews a while back, but also just other things to becoming a great PM in general. And do you know when you're ready? No, not really.
That's true. Yeah, you are never going to be ready until you interview. I guess we have time for two more questions. One is, do you have any recommendations for skills needed for someone from business background for PM positions?
Yeah, so I'm going to give you two answers for that. The first is there is actually a growing number of companies I'm seeing that are positioning and offering business product manager roles. I think what I've seen or what I've gathered there is that you actually are not involved in the traditional bread and butter like development of software, but you're doing more things that are on the business spectrum around talking to customers, understanding their workflows, understanding their pain points, and bringing that in to the process of building software, right? And you're also doing demos, you're helping out, you're getting more involved in those sales and marketing type functions and responsibilities of the spectrum. But yeah, that's one way I'd answer your question. And then the second is go back to when this chat gets posted, go back to the slides where we enter and talk about the 4 specific like categories or buckets of responsibilities, and note the ones where I labeled like, B and D, right? And see like how can you extend your skill set into those spaces.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So I guess we'll go 2 more questions because there's a question in the chat as well. But before I go
sure.
there, why did you choose the HCI and Design Masters rather than anything else?
Why did I choose HCI design? That's a longer story, but one of the main deciding factors there is that I was able to do the program while still staying at Google, and I had to make that as a personal decision whether I was ready and willing to like leave Google for a year or two to do a program. And at the time, we were launching like a bunch of stuff on, I was part of consumer hardware. So I was doing features on the Google Assistant, the smart speakers, Nest, and like Google Wi-Fi products. And it was just too exciting at the time. But I knew it was something I wanted to do.
Okay, thank you for sharing. So this would be our last question for the night, and really sorry for those whose questions couldn't be answered, but feel free to contact Q on the Product Bit Slack. If I'm sure once he gets some time, he'll be able to address it. But before we go, Ben Pandey has a question. Ben, why don't you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Oh, yeah.
Hi, Q. This is about your life when you were helping expand like internet capacity in Africa. I was wondering how you came across that opportunity. I think like what you did was really cool. Like tech is awesome, but so many people get left behind by tech and we don't talk about it enough. So like that work there, I think very important. Just wondering like how does someone get into that space? Like / what?
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know if I can answer then like how to get into it, but I can tell you sort of like my path, if that helps.
Yep.
Okay, so my first general statement to like the 55 people who are remaining is thanks guys for just hanging out with me. This was super fun. And I do hope like we get to do something. And if you need to, you can contact me like offline or on LinkedIn or whatever. I'll try my best to reply timely. But going back to your question, Ben, I think the first thing is there's a lot of pressure today to recognize or think of your career as like up and to the right. And I would actually pose to the group that like, don't think of it that way. Think of it as you're gonna have a very long career and it's gonna be spurts, right? So like you may have a stint or a spurt doing X, but if Y starts to interest you, I mean, you know, like life circumstances and life happens, but like don't hesitate to go that path, right? And that's a little bit of what I did. What a very, very short summary is the financial crisis happened in 2009 when I was in management consulting. A huge chunk of my team got like laid off. I was one of the remaining members, but the culture just became so terrible, personally from my perspective, that I decided, hey, you know what? This is not the best way to spend my time in a culture where you're being told that, you know, just be thankful you have a job, right? Like, not cutting it for me, doesn't meet my bar, right? So, okay, I went and actually found an opportunity to go work in Vietnam for a nonprofit, just on my own, because it was an area, microfinance, that I had studied in college, and it was interesting enough for me to go pursue. I made the decision to come back to the US instead of staying there. And so as a result of that, I picked up some jobs. And then Google actually came knocking, because they're like, huh, wait a minute. You basically went and did this just on your own free will, and you got some experience of like what it takes to build something from the ground up in a country or a developing economy that you know nothing about. Cool, like that is super interesting. We're interested in talking to you. It turns out they wanted me to go do something very similar in the world of internet for Africa, right? And so that was just something that like I never on my radar thought Google would hire me to do this or for that experience, right? But it opened that door, right? And so it was completely circumstantial. But what I did know was I don't like where I'm at. It doesn't meet my bar of what I think a good culture is. I'm gonna go find something else, something that is of interest to me, even if it means like I'm not going to be some senior manager consultant making some big salary for a few years, or I'm a few years behind my peers, right? Like that's a very personal decision. And you know, one thing led to another to product management today at Google. But yeah, I'll stop there and we can chat more offline.
That's amazing. I guess that's also a pointer to many people, including me on this call, that we are often looking for that perfect career role or perfect start, that we want a career to start this way. But I think Alex is a great example that if you keep doing what you just like doing, eventually you end up there. And it might be better, might not be for the better, but at least you'll gain some experience that helps. So, with that,
Yeah.
before we leave, I just want to mention that for everybody on this call, as we talked a bit about product courses, there's a product course that, being in affiliation with Product Buds, you are getting a 25% discount. So in case if you are interested, you can try out the course from Rocket Blocks, which is from Kenton, the one that Alex mentioned. It's the link. I'll just share it in the chat, and the code is Product Buds 25, and you get flat 25% off on the course if in case you are interested. So with that, sorry, I'll let Alex say any last words if he has, addressing the aspiring community or product buds. Alex.
No, yeah. So friends and colleagues call me Q, just the letter Q. There's a backstory that I can tell you if you reach out to me sometime. But I'm seeing some of the comments and stuff. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I think, you know, if I was to leave you with like one thing, just continuing what Ben had asked, is if you are interested in something, just ask yourself, are you, you know, if assuming you're at a life moment where you're capable of doing that, like, you know, go sideways instead of up and to the right, and just go pursue it. And you never know if it'll do something for you, but at least you'll be working on something that is super interesting to you. And you never know how you can craft that story and message back into your main track career, whatever it happens to be. Or maybe you'll pivot completely entirely, right? So if you're one of the lucky who has a passion or an interest, like, go for it, I say. But make sure that it's something that's like solving something that the world needs, you know, like, I mean, that's a personal moral judgment for me, but I think if you can align it to something that the world needs, like, awesome. If you don't know or have a particular interest at this moment in time, like, that's totally okay too. Not everyone will, and you'll get there and you'll figure it out along the way. But I would pose to you, right, the way to think about that is, okay, if I don't really know yet what I really want to do, let me go find a company that I really believe in, or some really smart people I know, and let me just work with them and learn from them, right? If you can learn and surround yourself with smart people who you think are way better than you, you're going to just by osmosis pick up stuff that you didn't even know you could pick up, right? So those are my two like sort of dimensions for you. And again, yeah, like if you guys need something, just reach out. Like we're all trying to figure this out together, right? Or it's one planet. So that's it.
That's amazing to know, Alex. Sorry, Q. And I think that's what we are doing here at the community as well. Like, product management is kind of really difficult to grasp your head around, especially if you're a student. So, having a community like this, I think, helps a lot of us just being there and learning from each other. So, thank you again, Q, for your time tonight. And I think from the comments, you can see that everybody is loving it. So, guys, if you liked today's talk, feel free to share your takeaways on LinkedIn, showing your appreciation to Q. That would be great, since it is not difficult as a working professional to take out a time to prepare something like this and present it. So, feel free to share it on LinkedIn and hope you guys have really good holidays. We would probably plan a casual event for PB and we'll let you guys know. Thank you so much. Thank you, Q, once again. Hope you guys have
Bye,
a great
guys.
good night.